Prepare to die. That's the tagline of Dark Souls. And that's why we're going to prepare ourselves before we start with the actual game. I try to keep it spoiler free, even though we are looking at enemies from the game right now. But without any context, those images won't ruin the game experience for you. When you bought Dark Souls in October 2011, like I did, you could only buy the limited edition, which also included the soundtrack, an art book, a mini strategy guide, a bonus map and a making of video. We're currently looking at the art book. That's the first thing I did because it's the only thing that's an actual hard copy and I could do this during the installation and patch process of the game. After that I started the game and failed miserably. Because what I should have done in the first place is take a look at the mini strategy guide and the bonus map. And that's what we're going to do after we've looked at the art book. If you can't wait, then click on the annotation. Now let's have a look at the mini strategy guide. First page is already really interesting because of this statement. If ever a game needed a great guide, it's Dark Souls. It's rare for a modern game to be designed so meticulously to enrage and engulf its players in a world that doesn't offer even the most basic systems. Its enemies are relentless and its areas labyrinthine. Just providing players with area maps is enough to make slowly inching around each corner a little easier to bear. The developers knew that every player would, at some point of the game, need a guide. Unless they have a very high frustration level and maybe even have monster demon souls. And that's why they included this mini strategy guide. These are all chapters that the complete strategy guide has to offer. The mini guide offers a brief preview of all, except for chapter 5. But we are only going to look at the first 2 chapters, because these explain everything a new player needs to know to survive in Lordaeron. The first thing you have to do is decide with which class you want to start. And this choice really does only have an impact on the beginning of the game, because you can develop your character in anything you want. Just don't level resistance, it's useless. The layout of the inventory is pretty simple once you've played around with it for a minute or 2. Just remember that you can toggle the display with square, toggle the status with triangle, and display help text by pressing select. The important thing here is that you manage your equipment load correctly. The only reason to go over 50% equipment load is if you're playing as a tank with a heavy armor and a giant shield. And, in my opinion, you should only go over 25% if you're using a heavy weapon that scales with strength. Your equipment load increases by 1 with each level of endurance. If you're using the Ring of Fire and Protection, it's 1.2. So, it's a linear increase. Almost every weapon and shield has minimum stats that you need to use it effectively. If you're only lacking in strength, try to two-hand your weapon with triangle. The quick inventory slots are very straightforward. In the left box is your left hand, and in the right box is your right hand. You can switch these weapons and shield to your second choice by pressing left or right on your D-pad. The box on the bottom shows your items and the box on the top shows your sorceries. You can switch these by pressing down or up on your D-pad. The most important thing during combat is to manage your stamina. Running out of stamina often results in death. The other important thing is to know how and when to lock on an enemy. This system is very simple, but needs a little bit of practice. You should also know that there are critical strikes, backstabs, and different attack types. Different weapons also have different hitboxes, and some attacks have an area of effect. Dealing with enemy attacks is straightforward. You can block most of the attacks as long as your shield has a high enough stability. You can dodge all enemy attacks, but this requires some training. The important thing on this page is the hint that you should try to cut off the boss's tails. This chapter covers the first enemies and the first boss you will encounter. We're just going to look through them and especially look at their health points. The zombies in the Undead Asylum have 69 HP. The Undead Soldier has 102 HP. And the first boss has a little bit more than 800 HP. The armored zombies at Final Link Shrine have 80 HP. So does the small Undead Red. The skeleton swordsmen at the Graveyard have 184 or 156 HP. The giant skeleton swordsman has 448 HP. The undead soldiers in the undead burg only have 85 HP. And the first black knight that you will encounter has 102 HP. This is a clear indicator that we should go to the undead burg before we visit the graveyard. The third chapter contains detailed maps of the first areas you'll visit, but we won't look at these, because it takes away too much from the exploration aspect of the game. Chapter 4 contains the stats of weapons and armors. We won't look at this chapter either, because it's boring. Just use the armor that looks good and the weapon that feels good. Just remember to upgrade them. The last chapter of this mini guide explains how the NPC quests work and completely spoils a few of them. I recommend you not to look at these chapters until you've completed your first playthrough. The content of this strategy guide is in some points outdated because the game has been patched a few times since its release. But I think Future Press deserves a lot of credit for creating this guide because it was the cornerstone of all Dark Souls wikis that are out there now. The last thing we're going to look at is the bonus map. It basically spoils the first few areas, but you have no clue what you're looking at if you haven't actually played through these areas. You only have to know where the waterway is and acknowledge how well connected these areas are. Now we are ready to actually start with the game. On the right annotation you will find the first episode. The left annotation you'll find my channel introduction. In the middle you can see the build that we're going to use in this playthrough.